All right, folks, buckle up because we're diving back into Lord of the Mysteries chapters 71 to 80. This ain't your grandma's bedtime story, unless grandma's into eldritch god secret societies and, well, some wild ass plot twists that'll leave your head spinning faster than that time you tried mixing tequila with bad decisions. And hey, while you're here, don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button like you're sealing a devil's pact. You've already made worse choices today, so what's one more, right? This should set a fun tone and encourage interaction. Let me know if you want any tweaks. Chapter 81. Finally meeting. I have to complete a mission independently in order to become an official member? Klein was taken aback. But we might not even have a mission this week, and it might not be so simple. Really? Now I gotta solo a mission just to get a promotion? Klein thought. This is starting to feel like one of those pyramid schemes where you never actually get to the top. Old Neil sniffed his coffee, giving Klein the kind of look you'd give someone who just complained about not getting enough likes on their social media post. It's only a ritual among Nighthawks. After all, we stand at the peak of beyonder danger and don't want our teammates to act like children who require constant care. This won't affect the salary that you'll receive as an official member or your privileges needed to fulfill your duty. Klein blinked, the gears in his brain slowly turning. So, this whole solo mission thing is just a hazing ritual? Fantastic. And why do you keep bringing up the salary? He touched his face, suddenly paranoid. Do I have money hungry written on my forehead or something? With a sheepish grin, he asked, does it have to be a mission of the Beyonder variety? That should be the case, but your performance yesterday was truly outstanding. You ingeniously killed a Beyonder that's at least sequence 8. I believe Fry, Royale, and the rest have already acknowledged you. Therefore, Dunn might just assign you to an ordinary mission, Old Neil said before sighing dramatically. You'll have your salary increase several-fold. I'll never encounter something like that again in my lifetime. Klein chuckled. Man really sounded like he was on the verge of tears over my paycheck. Changing the subject, Klein brought up his sequence pathway. Mr. Neil, do you think that the corresponding sequence 8 of Seer is clown? Neil raised an eyebrow. Clown? Klein nodded. Yeah, because nothing screams respectable career path like clowning around with supernatural powers. Neil pondered for a moment before replying. I can't give you any guarantees, but I think it's highly likely. Firstly, it matches up with what's said in the documents. Their agile movement and deception-based fighting style are key points. Next, other sequence pathways have similar situations. Do you know the corresponding sequence 8 for Mystery Prior? Klein shook his head, bracing himself. What's next? Juggling Scholar? Tightrope Mystic? Old Neil chuckled. It's Melee Scholar. Klein stared. Melee. Scholar. Neil grinned. Yep. Nothing like cracking skulls with a PhD, right? Goddess, I don't even like melee combat. This doesn't suit the image of a Mystery Prior at all. Klein couldn't help but laugh. I can understand. But hey, maybe melee combat is one of those mysteries worth pursuing. Maybe next they'll have a diploma program in butt-kicking theology. With a sigh, Old Neil finished his coffee. All right, let's not waste time. We've got mysticism to study, and you've got plenty of ritual magic to learn. Also, you still need to figure out how to make those amulets and charms. Klein nodded, pulling out a mental to-do list for the day. Step 1. Survive ritual magic without blowing anything up. Step 2. Practice shooting things until I don't look like a complete noob. Step 3. Pick up some new threads, because if I'm going to be fighting evil, I might as well look sharp doing it. In a fancy dining hall, complete with chandeliers that screamed, I have more money than sense, Joyce Meyer was surrounded by friends celebrating his return to Tingen. We all read the news. Just the written description alone was enough to scare me, said a guy with the kind of stubble that made you wonder if he just forgot to shave or was going for the rugged look. Joyce, I can't believe you went through such an ordeal. Cheers. The tragedy is over now, and the sunlight shines down upon us. Exalted is the steam. Exalted is the steam? Bruh, it's not a new game release. Joyce and his fiancée, Anna, clinked their glasses and downed what little champagne was left. Another friend, a girl with a cute nose, glanced at Anna and sighed. Anna was so worried. Every time I invited her for tea, she looked like she was mentally shopping for funeral outfits. Thank the goddess you're back, or I think she'd have just wasted away. Anna shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. She turned to another friend, Bogda, who had been unusually quiet. Bogda, why do you look like you've just been told your favorite pub shut down? Something wrong. The cute-nosed girl answered for him. Bogda's liver is messed up. He needs surgery. Liver surgery? Damn, that went from pub closed to you're about to be an organ donor real quick? Bogda grimaced. Yeah, but have you seen those surgeons? They treat patients like slabs of meat. I've read reports. They use axes for amputations. Lord, I might as well write my will before I go in. At this point, Anna chimed in. Bogda, maybe you should try a divination. If it says things will go well, go for the surgery. If not, look for another way. I know a real seer. He can help you. Bogda raised an eyebrow. For real? Anna nodded. Yep, he divined Joyce's return for me. And guess what? Joyce was waiting for me at home when I got there. Joyce backed her up, though he kept some details secret to avoid causing trouble with the police. The group was buzzing with excitement now, and after some thought, Bogda agreed to give it a shot. What's the seer's name and address? He asked. Klein Moretti. You can find him at the Divination Club on House Street, Anna replied with confidence. Back at the Deweyville Library, Klein was having less luck with his research. After failing to find a specific book on the Hornassus main peak, he sighed. Man, you guys need a computer. Even a halfway decent librarian would be an upgrade. He was soon directed to some journals that could be of help. As he sat by the window, enjoying the sunshine, he flipped through the pages. Suddenly, he noticed a familiar face, none other than Sir Deweyville himself, the library's owner. Klein smirked as he watched the philanthropist pass by, his fingers tapping his glabella in thought. Wonder if I should divine whether or not this guy would donate enough for the library to upgrade to the 19th century. Klein went over to the bookshelf, scanned the journal issues, and pulled out the ones his mentor mentioned. Then he randomly found a spot by the window to sit down. Under the bright afternoon sun, he began reading the information in the library quietly. Ancient relics don't solely exist on the main peak of the Hornassus mountain range. They're also spread out across the surrounding forests, valleys, and gentle slopes around the main peak. These relics are formed from lofty domes and gigantic stone columns. Honestly, they can be described as magnificent. I'm curious as to how the original residents mined and processed these rocks. Hypothetically, let's assume that they performed their mining operation on the spot without needing to send them up the mountain. There's a strange pattern where the relics become larger in size the closer you are to the mountain peak. But surprisingly, there are no ruins on the peak. According to our hypothesis, there should be palaces that don't resemble man-made buildings, divine halls used for sacrifices. Palaces that don't look like they were man-made, divine halls used for sacrifices. Could it be the one that I saw in my dream? While Klein ruminated, he suddenly heard footsteps approaching him from a distance. He looked up and saw a familiar face, a face that often appeared in the papers. He had a squarish face, thick eyebrows, a firm nose, short dark blonde hair, azure blue eyes, and tightly closed lips. All of these features belonged to a certain famous person from Tinjin City, a philanthropist, entrepreneur, and the owner of this library, Sir Deweyville. Beside Deweyville was the middle-aged butler who Klein had met before. Klein watched them walk by from more than 10 meters away. Out of curiosity, he raised his right hand and lightly tapped his glabella twice. Chapter 82, Herb's Store. Various colors surfaced as auras and entered Klein's eyes. He casually studied Sir Deweyville's condition. He's very healthy. There are almost no hidden problems. But his emotional state? Man, it's a train wreck. Amid the dullness, there's frailty. His mental state is frail? Trouble sleeping, huh? But that purple aura at his head is completely fine. Klein muttered silently to himself as Sir Deweyville walked off and left the library. Retracting his gaze, Klein pinched his forehead and sighed inwardly. Being a tycoon sure isn't easy. I mean, who knew rich people had such drama? He didn't pay much attention to the matter and returned his gaze to the journal issues in front of him. Klein didn't find many clues after reading through them. He could only confirm a few things. Firstly, there existed an ancient kingdom in the Hornasis mountain range and its surroundings. This kingdom's history dates back at least 1,500 years. Secondly, their architectural style was all about being grand. Like, look at me, I'm important levels of grand. They left behind all sorts of murals, and from those murals, it could be deduced that they believed that the Evernight would protect the loved ones of the departed. Finally, in the ruins, there were symbols that represented the Evernight everywhere, but they clearly were not the Evernight sacred emblem, kind of like a knockoff designer bag. If I had a chance? No. Even if I had a chance, I'll never go there. Klein muttered with clenched teeth. He vowed not to court death. Who has time for that kind of vacation? After tidying up the journal articles and returning them to their spots, he put on his hat, lifted his cane, and left the Deweyville Library. Divination Club. Bogda looked at the beautiful lady in charge of receiving guests and said, "I'd like to have a divination." Angelica smiled politely and said, "Do you have a preferred fortune teller? Or would you like to flip through our introduction guide and choose the one that's most suitable for you?" Bogda pressed the right side of his abdomen and gasped silently for breath while saying, "I wish to have Mr. Bright Klein Moretti divine for me." "But Mr. Moretti is not here today," Angelica answered with uncertainty, as if she just crushed his hopes and dreams. Bogda fell silent for a moment as he paced a few steps and asked, "When will Mr. Moretti be available?" "No one knows. He has his own matters to deal with. From what I've seen, he usually comes here on Monday afternoons," Angelica said as she pondered over the matter, probably wondering if Mr. Moretti had a secret life as a superhero. All right. Bogda's face darkened as he turned around, planning to leave. "Sir, you can choose other fortune tellers as well. For example, you can choose Mr. Hanas Vincent, who is famous in Tinjin City." Angelica tried her best to prevent the loss of business. Bogda stopped in his tracks and considered it for a moment before saying, "No, I only trust Mr. Moretti. Well, can I wait here for a moment? Perhaps he might come after he's done with his matters." "No problem," Angelica said with a warm smile, probably relieved that she wasn't losing a customer. Bogda went to the sofa and sat down. Sometimes he stroked his cane, at other times he looked out the window, clearly looking rather impatient. Dude needs a stress ball. Seconds turned to minutes. Just as Bogda's mind was a mess, unsure if he should continue waiting or leave, he heard the beautiful lady exclaim in pleasant surprise, "Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti." Klein saw the familiar Angelica and was just about to ask why it was always her. Did she not need to rest or take any days off? But he remembered he was a seer, so it wouldn't be appropriate to ask such questions. Instead, he had to use the tone of a charlatan and say something like, "How marvelous it is for fate to compel us to meet once again, Madame Angelica." Would this sound like I'm hitting on her? Klein's mind whirled as he finally replied with a smile. "Good afternoon, Madame Angelica. A customer wishes to hire you for a divination." Angelica pointed to Bogda, who had hurriedly stood up from the sofa like a kid who just spotted ice cream. "Someone actually requested me?" Klein took off his half-top hat in pleasant surprise, pinching his glabella twice while doing so. "Good afternoon, sir." He looked over when his voice suddenly came to a pause. In his spirit vision, he saw the requester's liver looking dim. It was nearly black in color, making the rest of his body unbalanced as his aura was thin in various places. "Dude, that's not good." Klein deliberated over his words and said with a serious expression, "Sir, you should see a doctor and not seek a divination." Bogda stood stunned on the spot as he immediately gave a pleasant look of surprise while muttering, "How fascinating!" Anna wasn't lying to me. He hurriedly looked up at Klein in earnest. "Mr. Moretti, I've already seen a doctor and might have to undergo surgery. However, I'm frightened about the surgery. I would like to divine the outcome." The surgery of this era is really fraught with danger. Although Emperor Roselle had given the impetus, this era still lacks most of the necessary technology. Klein didn't reject his request and nodded slightly. "My divination fee is 8 pence. Is that fine?" 8 pence? Bogda exclaimed in surprise. "You're only charging 8 pence? According to Anna's description and the performance Mr. Moretti had just shown me, I'm willing to pay at least £1. Haven't you heard of small margins with large volume?" Klein was embarrassed for a moment. After thinking for a few seconds, he calmly smiled and replied, It is enough just being blessed with the ability to receive revelations from the divine and catch a glimpse of fate. Therefore, we must maintain our humility and suppress our greed. Only by doing so can we continue being bestowed with our gifts. You are a true seer. Bogda held his chest and bowed, his tone filled with sincerity, as if he was meeting a celebrity. Upon receiving Bogda's praise and trust, Klein's spirituality seemed to relax. As for the description of his principles, it also gave him some new insight, like an epiphany, but without the intense staring. Miss Angelica, is Topaz available? He turned to the beautiful lady beside him. Angelica heaved a sigh of relief for Bogda as she smiled sweetly. Yes. After entering the divination room, Klein instructed Bogda to lock the door. Then, he sat behind the table and pinched his forehead. Shall we use tarot cards for the divination? He inquired with a smile. Spirit dowsing was only suitable to determine matters related to him. As for drawing an astrolabe, it was too time-consuming. Ain't nobody got time for that. I'll leave it up to you. Bogda had no objections. Therefore, Klein helped him shuffle and cut the deck before laying them out in an intis formation. Thanks to his uniqueness as a seer, Klein did not flip the other cards. Instead, he directly flipped the card that indicated the final result. A reversed wheel of fortune. Things will develop badly, he said solemnly as he shot a glance, feeling like the messenger of doom. The color drained from Bogda's face instantly, and his lips trembled. Is it hopeless? As Klein tried his best to think of a solution, he said, "Let me try a different divination method. Please leave your ring behind. Next, write your date of birth on this piece of paper. Then, please wait outside quietly." Influenced by his gentle and comforting tone, Bogda calmed down and followed the instructions by writing down the information and leaving his ring behind. As he watched Bogda leave, Klein wrote a sentence on the piece of paper. Outcome of Bogda Jones's surgery. He picked up the ring and paper slip and leaned back into his seat before using a dream divination technique. In a blurry and distorted world, he gradually found himself, only to see the gentleman collapse with an ashen expression. He was covered in white cloth as he was pushed out of the quaking operating room. This time, Klein didn't encounter anything strange. He no longer felt the sense of being watched, so he quickly woke up. He knitted his brows tightly as he considered how he was going to inform Bogda about the outcome. The surgery may very well lead to death. I can try the restorative ritualistic magic I learned today, but that would expose the matter of Beyonders. Besides, I have to apply for Captain. Here's the adjusted version of Chapter 82, with added humor and slang while maintaining the original content. Chapter 82, Herb Store. Various colors surfaced as auras and entered Klein's eyes. He casually studied Sir Deweyville's condition. He's very healthy. There are almost no hidden problems. But his emotional state? Man, it's a train wreck. Amid the dullness, there's frailty. His mental state is frail? Trouble sleeping, huh? But that purple aura at his head is completely fine. Klein muttered silently to himself as Sir Deweyville walked off and left the library. Retracting his gaze, Klein pinched his forehead and sighed inwardly. Being a tycoon sure isn't easy. I mean, who knew rich people had such drama? He didn't pay much attention to the matter and returned his gaze to the journal issues in front of him. Klein didn't find many clues after reading through them. He could only confirm a few things. Firstly, there existed an ancient kingdom in the Hornacis mountain range and its surroundings. This kingdom's history dates back at least 1,500 years. Secondly, their architectural style was all about being grand. Like, look at me, I'm important levels of grand. They left behind all sorts of murals, and from those murals, it could be deduced that they believed that the Evernight would protect the loved ones of the departed. Finally, in the ruins, there were symbols that represented the Evernight everywhere, but they clearly were not the Evernight sacred emblem, kind of like a knockoff designer bag. If I had a chance? No. Even if I had a chance, I'll never go there. Klein muttered with clenched teeth. He vowed not to court death. Who has time for that kind of vacation? After tidying up the journal articles and returning them to their spots, he put on his hat, lifted his cane, and left the Deweyville Library. Divination Club. Bogda looked at the beautiful lady in charge of receiving guests and said, "I'd like to have a divination." Angelica smiled politely and said, "Do you have a preferred fortune teller? Or would you like to flip through our introduction guide and choose the one that's most suitable for you? Klein quickly remembered the details. He rapped the corners of the table and quickly made a decision. After using spirit dowsing to quickly determine if it was a good or bad idea, Klein walked out the door. When he saw Bogda stand up in a fluster, he returned his ring to him and said warmly with a smile, "I found hope for you." "Really?" Bogda asked, pleasantly surprised. Klein did not reply to him as he continued talking. "Your hope lies in the East Borough, on Vlad Street. It's related to the single-term Lawson. If you can't find it, come back here again on Monday at 4 in the afternoon." "Good, good." Bogda nodded as he repeated himself. He excitedly fished out his wallet and produced 5 pence and 3 pennies. He had done according to what Klein had said without using tips to corrupt a true seer. The corners of Klein's lips twitched as he received the money, but he smiled brilliantly. "I hope you will find hope as soon as possible." After Bogda left, he handed over the commission like the previous time and also gave Angelica tips, pretending as though he had collected a soli. East Borough, Vlad Street. Bogda walked from one end of the street to the other, repeating it 3 times until his liver started to ache. Finally, he determined that there was only one place that had anything to do with Lawson on the street. It was the Lawson's Folk Herb Store, numbered 18 on the street. Mustering his courage, he walked in and caught the smell of the various herbs. He saw that the owner of the shop had black but very short hair. His face was round, and he looked to be in his 30s or 40s. The boss's formal attire resembled that of a village witch doctor. It was a deep black robe embroidered with all kinds of strange symbols. "Hello, do you have medicine that can treat my disease?" Bogda asked politely. The boss raised his head and swept his deep blue eyes across Bogda and smiled. "Your liver disease is very serious, but the premise of everything is whether you have the money. Do you have enough to pay for the medicine?" He can tell. Bogda suddenly felt a lot more confident as he nodded frantically. "How much is your medicine?" £10. It's a very fair price." The boss fished out a bag of herbs from under the counter and said, "Add sufficient water and boil it into medicine. After boiling it, add 10 drops of fresh rooster blood, then drink it down immediately. This bag of herbs can be cooked thrice. You will be fine after 3 times." As he spoke, he opened the yellowish-brown paper and threw in all sorts of strange herbs. "It sounds extremely shady." Bogda gulped down his saliva and said, "That's it?" The boss stared at him and immediately smiled. "Do you still want something else? What about this bag? Once you recover from your liver disease, I can give you a guarantee that your wife will be very satisfied." He chuckled as he took out a black-papered bag of herbs and suppressed his voice. "There's mummy powder inside. Trust me, a lot of aristocrats consume this stuff. They put it in their tea or boil it as soup." Bogda's confidence in the boss wavered to the point of feeling disgusted. "I believe in Mr. Moretti." He took a deep breath, fished out his wallet, and pulled out the 2 biggest notes from what little was left of his gold pounds. Chapter 83, Craving. Holding on to the yellowish-brown paper bag full of herbs, Bogda staggered out of Lawson's Folk Herb Store, looking like he'd just picked up a bag of disappointment instead of medicinal magic. While waiting for a tracked carriage, he suddenly had an epiphany that made him feel like a fool. He had spent £10 to buy a bag of stuff? Seriously? This was nearly a month's salary for him. If it wasn't for his blind faith in Anna and Joyce, he wouldn't have lugged that much cash to the divination club. Could it be that the reason why Mr. Moretti only accepted 8 pence for his divination had something to do with his collusion with the boss of Lawson's Folk Herb Store? Talk about a classic scam right out of a comedy sketch. When Bogda connected the dots, he even started to suspect Klein, and then Joyce and Anna too. Everyone was a suspect in this herbal heist. When a tracked carriage finally rolled up, he glanced at the herbs in his hand, feeling like he'd just bought a ticket to Regret City. Unable to turn back, he climbed into the carriage with a heavy heart, contemplating his life choices. Inside Lawson's Folk Herb Store, the boss watched Bogda leave and suddenly whipped around, yelling at the door where a pile of herbs lay. "Charmaine, stop purchasing herbs from today. We're cutting off the supply before I'm accused of witchcraft." "Why, master?" A handsome-looking youth with disheveled hair stumbled out, looking as confused as a cat at a dog show. The boss chuckled. This is the 16th customer who's come because of my fame. If this keeps up, I'm going to have the Nighthawks, the machinery hive mind, and the mandated punishers banging down my door. Next thing you know, I'll be forced to relocate to a city where nobody knows my name. Cheers to anonymity. Am I right? Should we sublease this store? Charmaine nodded, clearly concerned. The boss laughed. If you want to stay, you can be the boss of this store. You're already good at identifying herbs and concocting medicine. Just remember to deposit half of your monthly profits into my anonymous Backlund bank account. Think of it as your don't get caught fee. But I haven't learned what you're really good at, Charmaine whined, tired of living like a nomad, but too curious to give up the secrets of his master's magical formulas. The boss rocked leisurely in his chair. That's not something you can learn just because you want to. It takes time, like fine wine or a fine cheese, or your uncle's bad jokes. A blackish-green bubbling liquid appeared in front of Bogda's eyes. It smelled like stinking socks and had the color that made you want to question all your life choices. When the rooster blood was dropped into the medicine, Bogda's father looked at his son worriedly. I think surgery is the best option, he said, not entirely convinced that this potion wouldn't lead to some tragicomic outcome. The few drops of rooster blood bubbled and fizzed like they were auditioning for a horror movie. Bogda took a deep breath. If this medicine is useless, I'll consider surgery, but only if I can pick the surgeon. I'm not letting some quack with questionable hygiene touch me. The Lord will watch over you, Bogda's father said, gesturing a triangular sacred emblem across his chest like he was casting a protective spell, more like a please don't let my son explode charm. By the time the boiling liquid cooled down, Bogda had no intention of wasting the 10 pounds. He raised his right hand, closed his eyes, and in one dramatic swoop, he chugged the potion like it was a cheap shot at the bar. The pungent aroma, a noxious blend of blood and regret, swirled in his mouth as he nearly spat out everything he'd just consumed. I'm definitely going to regret this later. That night, Bogda had an upset stomach. He visited the bathroom 6 times, and by the time the crimson moon vanished, he finally fell asleep, groggy and questioning his life choices. After what felt like an eternity, he jolted awake, dreaming that he was being reprimanded by his boss at work. Thankfully, I took 3 days of annual leave. I don't have to rush to work, Bogda sighed in relief, feeling like a new man compared to the sluggish state he had been in for weeks. He subconsciously pressed his abdomen. Surprisingly, the region that had hurt before felt normal now, just a bit tender. Don't tell me it was really effective. That apothecary was clearly just fooling me. Or maybe he was a genius. I mean, who wouldn't want to gamble on a potion that looks like it came straight from a witch's cauldron? Inside the civilian staff office of the Blackthorn Security Company, Klein had carved out a space where no one would disturb him. Quite the feat in a place bustling with all sorts of characters. He held a carving knife, his spirituality flowing as he meticulously carved incantations and symbols onto 2 silver accessories. The incantation was a request to avoid disaster, written in Hermes. The symbols represented the Evernight goddess and the Empress of Disaster and Horror. Talk about an edgy jewelry collection. Aside from that, Klein added the path number that corresponded to the goddess 7 and the magical characteristic, because, one can never be too careful with their charms and spells. The charms and amulets had to be engraved on both sides. Each side's symbols and incantations were in the realm of mysticism. Unfortunately, the ones circulating among the masses were filled with more mistakes than a toddler's coloring book. At that moment, Klein had a pile of damaged materials to his right. Through endless practice and patience, he finally felt brave enough to start creating the amulets for Benson and Melissa. He calmed his mind, his spirituality bursting forth from the tip of his carving knife. The number 7 appeared on the surface of the silver accessories, glowing like the number on a winning lottery ticket. With his carving knife set down, a strange, majestic, and terrifying energy surged through the room, like the climax of a magical reality show. The commotion quickly settled as the incantations on both sides of the accessory became complete, emanating a serene blackness that screamed, "I'm both cool and dangerous." He gently polished the silver accessory, feeling a tinge of coolness from the smooth surface. It's done. He happily tucked the finished amulet and another one he had previously made into his pocket, ready to bestow some luck upon his friends. Amulets created by Beyonders possessed a certain level of effectiveness. They allowed the wearer to unknowingly avoid disasters to a certain extent, kind of like the friend who always manages to dodge awkward social situations but leaves you high and dry. But of course, their spirituality would gradually fade. Unless one used high-level ritualistic magic, something Klein wasn't equipped for yet, these amulets were only good for a year. When the time comes, I can use my spirituality to make another one. Klein thought, nodding, and began tidying up the chaotic table, already daydreaming about his next magical masterpiece. He didn't make one for himself at the moment because an amulet of that level had limited effects on him. Therefore, his goal was to gain a deeper understanding of incantations before trying to mix it with ritualistic magic. After all, who wouldn't want a defensive amulet that could be activated with sound? Talk about a party trick. After everything was done, Klein walked out of the office, preparing to hand over the damaged materials. That was when he spotted Captain Dunn striding towards him in his black windbreaker. Dunn's deep gray eyes scanned Klein like he was appraising a rare collectible. Then he smiled. Klein, the Holy Cathedral has approved it. You're now an official member. Welcome to the club, where we wear black and brood dramatically. Really? That's great. Klein expressed his delight, feeling like he'd just passed an initiation test. Dunn nodded, a smile gracing his lips. You can now receive a makeup pay of £3 for this week. You'll earn £4.50 every subsequent week until the advance payment is cleared. That's right, money is flowing, my friend. By the way, did I mention the Nighthawk's ritual? Every official Nighthawk has to independently complete a mission. Only by doing so will you gain the recognition of your partners. Considering your outstanding performance, I believe I can assign you an ordinary mission instead. You'll finally meet all the Nighthawks in Tingen City and let them know who's boss. Klein replied without hesitation. All right, bring on the adventure. £3 plus his compensation of £7. He could finally afford that new suit he'd been eyeing. Well, who knows when his mission will arrive? Klein waited eagerly until Sunday, the day of Selina's birthday banquet. Dressed in his formal suit, with a brush and handkerchief in hand, Klein looked himself in the mirror, giving himself a nod of approval. Look at you, you suave devil, he murmured before strutting down to the first floor like he owned the place. At that moment, Melissa was scrutinizing Benson's clothes. Is there a problem? Benson raised his cane, feeling a little lacking due to his sister's gaze. He felt that there was nothing wrong with him when he inspected himself. He was already dressed quite decently. Melissa stopped staring at him and said with a serious expression, Benson, that is a very old suit you're wearing. There will be a lot of excellent ladies and madams participating in today's birthday banquet. I believe that by wearing that, it'll be a form of disrespect to them. Klein was originally filled with questions. However, when he heard Melissa's emphasis, he immediately realized what was happening. He went over with a chuckle and said, Benson and I share a similar build. He can wear my other tuxedo. He had already informed his siblings about buying a new suit. He explained it away by saying that his clothes had been torn while inspecting certain objects. Therefore, the company generously compensated him. Of course, he concealed the matter of him being promoted with a pay rise. He was afraid of scaring them and only planned to tell them after half a year. Such an explanation made Blackthorn Security Company and Melissa extremely envious. They felt that the Blackthorn Security Company was an impeccable employer. There's no need to, right? Benson retorted, having not realized the gravity of the situation. No, it's extremely important. Klein pushed Benson's shoulders up the stairs. My tuxedo is hanging on the clothes rack. After watching Benson go up the stairs in a daze, Klein turned around and smiled at Melissa. Are you hoping that Benson will use the opportunity provided by Selina's birthday banquet to begin a beautiful new romance? He had been reading quite a fair amount of newspapers and magazines recently. He knew that aristocrats and middle-class banquets were typically grounds for blind dates. Melissa nodded solemnly. Yes, Benson has missed out too much because of us. Sis, Why are you like a mother? Klein looked at Melissa as he suddenly shook his head with an exasperated laugh. Chapter 84. Elizabeth. Seeing the unconvinced look on his sister's face, Klein suddenly felt like it was a good opportunity. He sized her up and said with a solemn expression, Melissa, I think you aren't showing enough respect to today's banquet as well. What? Melissa wore a puzzled look, like she just stepped off a spaceship. Klein pointed at her neck. As a lady, you are lacking a necklace that accentuates that area. Without waiting for his sister to say another word, he smiled as he fished out a silver amulet wrapped with angel wings from his pocket. Thankfully, I prepared one for you. Melissa was taken aback at first before she asked, How much was it? Sis, your concerns are really quite misplaced. Klein silently scoffed as he explained with a chuckle, It's actually not very expensive. Since it was in an incomplete state, I imitated an item that I've seen before and engraved blessing incantations and beautiful patterns on it. You engraved them? Melissa was indeed distracted. Her interest piqued. How is it? What do you think of my work? Klein took the opportunity to hand over the amulet to his sister, feeling like a proud parent showing off their kid's finger painting. Melissa studied it before gently biting down on her lip. I like the surrounding angel feathers. If you think the incantations and symbols I engraved are ugly, then just say so. There's no need to mince your words. An amulet's value is in its effects. The corner of Klein's mouth twitched. Just as he was about to urge his sister to accept it, he saw Melissa put on the necklace with a forced expression on her face. She then carefully adjusted the positioning of the amulet. Perfect. Klein sized her up and gave her exaggerated praise, like a fashion critic at a runway show. Melissa shot him a glance and looked down at her amulet. She said listlessly, Klein, you were never like that before. Acting like that. Perhaps it's because of my good job. With a decent income, I've become more confident, Klein interrupted his sister and gave a preemptive explanation, not wanting to dive into his self-esteem issues. Sigh. Even though I received the original Klein's memory fragments, making myself appear natural in most major aspects, certain fine details are still there. I'm still used to presenting my real personality, especially when I'm getting closer and more familiar with Benson and Melissa. He sighed inwardly, wishing he could just blend in like a chameleon at a rave. Melissa seemed to accept his explanation and pouted her lips. It's great that you're like that. Really great. After the two engaged in a short conversation, Benson came down having changed his clothes. He wore a white shirt with a black vested tuxedo. His black bow tie and a pair of long, straight trousers made it seem like he had undergone a complete makeover, like a frog turning into a prince. Same for the receding hairline. Klein chuckled inwardly. Excellent, Benson. It suits you very well, he said with a brilliant smile while throwing up his hands like he was on a talent show. Melissa also nodded in agreement on the sideline. The facts show that my clothing is more important than me, Benson gave a self-derisive comment, fully embracing his inner comedian. Klein took the opportunity to fish out the remaining amulet and repeated his explanation from earlier before saying, I also made one for you. Not bad. I'll bring it with me. Benson accepted it without a fuss, quipping, Klein, I wouldn't find it odd, even if you were to suddenly know how to style your hair, make clothes, fix watches, and feed curly-haired baboons. Life is just so full of surprises, Klein replied with a smile, secretly hoping he'd get a chance to feed the baboons. Following that, the siblings tidied themselves up before walking out the main door. They took a trackless public carriage and arrived at the Northborough's Fania Street, where Selena's house was. The Wood family lived in a terrace house as well, but unlike Klein's place, they had a porch. They had a small lawn in the front, making it look very elegant, like the house was showing off its fancy shoes. When they rang the doorbell, Klein, Benson, and Melissa only had to wait for around 10 seconds before they were able to see the star of the day, Selena Wood. With a head covered in wine-red hair, the girl gave Melissa a delighted hug. I like this dress of yours. It makes you look exceptionally beautiful. Standing beside Selena Wood was her father, Mr. Wood, senior employee of Backlund Bank's Tingen branch. Welcome, our honorable elder brother. Welcome, our young historian. He deliberately addressed Benson and Klein in an exaggerated manner, like he was announcing the start of a Broadway show. Young historian, why doesn't he add the description of me having a conscience? Klein retorted as he took off his hat and replied with a smile. Mr. Wood, you look much more spirited and younger than I imagined. His style of flattery had unknowingly inclined himself to the foodaholic empire. Benson held out his hand and shook Wood's hand. I know a lot of bank employees, but they're all equally arrogant and stiff, as though they're the latest machines. None of them are as civilized as you. If you were to meet me at the bank, you might not say that about me. Wood laughed cheerfully, clearly enjoying the banter. After exchanging pleasantries, Selina, who was wearing a new dress, led the siblings inside with a hop in her step. At times, she would mention in her usual tone that Elizabeth is already here, and at other times she would suppress her voice saying, Melissa, your brothers are more handsome than I imagined. Hey, I have good hearing. Although you are flattering me. Klein helplessly looked at the two 16-year-old girls walking ahead of him, wondering what their standards were. This isn't right. I'm still quite far from being considered handsome. Miss Selina, how ugly did you imagine Benson and I to be? A balding, gloomy, fat man with a pale expression and lifeless eyes? Klein pinched his glabella in passing as he diligently practiced his spirit vision, mentally preparing for the compliments he had yet to receive. Miss Selina Wood is healthy. She's excited and very happy. Mr. Wood's lungs are a little problematic. Right? I see his pipe. Klein swept his gaze across the crowd while in a good mood, taking in the lively atmosphere. Elizabeth, Melissa is here. At that moment, Selina introduced with a brisk tone, like she was introducing a new flavor of ice cream. A girl dressed in a blue frilly dress walked over. She had naturally curled brown hair and adorable baby fat, like a cute little marshmallow. Klein was stunned when he saw her because he knew the girl. He had helped her choose an amulet back at the underground market. Elizabeth greeted Melissa first before looking at Benson and Klein. She was stunned and her brows knitted slightly, as though she was thinking about something, probably trying to remember where she'd seen them before. Soon, Elizabeth smiled and politely greeted them as though nothing had happened, mastering the art of pretending. Klein also pretended not to recognize her. Under Wood's lead, they came to the sofa in the living room where they were introduced to Chris, Selina Wood's brother, and the other guests. As Klein watched Benson chat with Chris and the other solicitors happily over the topic of their neighbor, Mr. Shad, he couldn't help but feel envious. I don't have such socializing skills. He picked up a cocktail from a table in the corner of the room as he listened quietly. At times, he would nod and echo with a smile, trying not to look like he was judging their conversation. It didn't take long before all the guests arrived and the banquet officially began. As too many guests had been invited, the Wood family's dining table could not accommodate everyone. Therefore, the banquet was done in a buffet manner. The maidservant served the steak dishes, roast chicken, fried fish, mashed potatoes, etc., and placed them on different tables. The male servants were responsible for carving the meat, allowing for guests to take what they wanted, like a buffet in a five-star hotel. Klein couldn't help but click his tongue when he saw the elegant enamel plates and silver cutlery. He felt that the Woods were being too extravagant as a middle-class family, like they were trying to win a reality show. Since they're so rich, why would Chris need so many years to prepare for his wedding? When he thought of what his sister had previously mentioned, he was puzzled. Yeah, it was probably to save up money to buy this cutlery that would have taken them so many years to afford. To such families, they have to look respectable. Amidst his mixed emotions, Klein picked up a plate and walked in front of a dining table. He forked a piece of honey-glazed roasted meat, thinking it looked so good it should be on a magazine cover. At that moment, Elizabeth with her adorable baby fat cheeks came over. As she looked at the food, she whispered, "So you are Melissa's brother." "Thank you. Selina likes the amulet I gave her a lot. She said that she felt healthier the moment she wore it." Selina? Amulet. Klein suddenly recalled the reason for selecting an amulet for the girl beside him. It was to give to a friend who liked mysticism as a birthday gift. That friend was Selina? Selina liked items related to mysticism? Klein frowned slightly as he smiled politely. It might just be akin to a placebo effect. After saying that, he began waiting for her to praise Emperor Roselle. However, Elizabeth's reaction was that of confusion. What's a placebo effect? It means it's completely psychological. At times, we believe that we will turn for the better and end up really becoming better, Klein explained crudely. No, she said it's different from the amulets that she bought in the past. It feels different, Elizabeth emphasized. She cocked her head and shot a glance at Klein and said curiously, I never expected Melissa's brother to be an expert at mysticism. As you know, I studied history, so it's common to encounter similar matters. Klein diverted the topic skillfully as he asked, Are you also studying at the Tianjin Technical School? No, Selena and I were Melissa's former schoolmates. Later, she went to a technical school. I study at the nearby Evos Public School, Elizabeth explained seriously. A public school wasn't established and maintained by the government. Instead, it was a school that accepted students from the public. It was an evolution of good grammar schools, whose goal was to groom graduates so as to enter university. The schools were rather expensive, and they would consider the student's family background. It could even be out of the range of typical middle-class families. She didn't talk much. After choosing her food, she returned to Selena's side. After congratulating the star of the day on a happy birthday, the banquet gradually came to an end. Klein and Benson were invited to a game of Texas Hold'em. The small blind was half a penny, and the big blind was a penny. As for Melissa, Elizabeth, Selena, and their friends, they went upstairs. It was unknown if they were chatting or playing games. Klein's luck was pretty bad. He played about 20 rounds, but didn't receive a good hand at all. All he could do was fold and be a spectator. When he flipped the ends of his cards again, he found a 2 of hearts and a 5 of spades. Shall I try a bluff once? Klein considered for a moment, but did not manage to muster the courage. He also resisted the urge to use divination to cheat. He covered his cards and rapped the table, indicating that he was not making a call. Then, he got up and left the table to head for the bathroom. Roselle was also a person with obsessive-compulsive disorder. He actually found an odd reason to name the playstyle Texas. Klein shook his head as he proceeded forward. At that moment, he suddenly came to a halt as his pupils constricted. His spiritual perception told him that there was a strange fluctuation upstairs. Chapter 85, Urgency. The strange, twisted, and obscure fluctuation was short-lived. Shortly afterward, Klein even suspected that he was hallucinating. Maybe the bad takeout from last night was catching up with him. If he wasn't considered rather skilled at spiritual perception, he'd probably have written off the abnormality as just another weird Tuesday in his life. Klein frowned as he thought of his sister upstairs. He tightly held onto his cane, because who doesn't need a trusty walking stick when you're about to face potential supernatural shenanigans? As he hobbled around the bathroom and made his way to the Wood household staircase. He quickly went upstairs while following the traces with his spiritual perception before arriving at the living room beside the balcony. This should be it. Klein mumbled, tapping twice on his forehead like he was trying to reboot his brain. Auras penetrated the walls and the large wooden door before entering his vision. Most of the colors were ordinary, with a blurry outline, just like the memories of his last date. However, one of them in particular was rippling with a sinister dark green color over its surface that slowly corroded inwards. Great, just what I needed. A supernatural party crasher, he thought. Just as I thought, something wasn't right. Klein wore an unusually stern expression as he reached out with his right hand and removed the silver chain that was wrapped around his left wrist. You know, the kind of chain you wear when you want to feel like a badass but are really just a wannabe magician. He held the silver chain in his left hand, allowing the topaz to dangle before him. Because who doesn't like a little bling when confronting the unknown? When the topaz stopped swinging, he traced the spherical light and chanted inwardly, "The room before me has danger caused by the supernatural." Normally, spirit dowsing was only suitable for divining something that was related to him or the specific circumstances in a small region around him. As such, Klein described the chant in a very specific manner. The danger could affect him, and the room was right in front of him. The room before me has danger caused by the supernatural. After repeating the chant 7 times, Klein's eyes widened as he saw the topaz rotating in a clockwise motion rapidly. Talk about a bad sign! It was an indication that there was indeed danger caused by the supernatural inside the room, and it was of considerable danger. Selena is a mysticism enthusiast. Did something go extremely wrong when she was dabbling with some sort of ritual? What should I do? Klein massaged his brows, wishing he had just stuck to playing video games instead of getting tangled in all this. He wrapped the chain around his wrist before knocking on the door. Thump! 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 He knocked on the door 3 times rhythmically and wore an amiable smile on his face. Let's charm them with my winning personality, shall we? The door opened with a creak. Melissa, who was wearing her new dress, appeared in front of Klein. Klein, is something wrong? The girl didn't expect her brother to be here, so she was momentarily surprised. Klein responded with a smile, without any sign of distress. I was just curious since I heard you gals enjoying yourselves. Sorry for disturbing all of you. Melissa lowered her head in apology, feeling somewhat embarrassed. We're playing with magic mirror divination. Selena knows a lot and it's very fun. Magic mirror divination. Sis, why don't you gals play the Charlie Charlie challenge or Ouija boards instead? Klein shook his head, feeling both peeved and amused. He looked behind Melissa and into the living room. He saw Selena with her beaming smile and deep dimples. The picture of innocence, or so it seemed. However, in his spirit vision, the wine-red-haired girl who was holding a silver-coated mirror was being encroached by the sinister dark green colors. This just screamed, bad idea. As his mind whirled, Klein deliberated over his words and said, Heh heh, I won't be interrupting your game. Ah, right, where's Elizabeth? I had chatted with her over FISAC grammar. She mentioned that she wanted to ask me some questions. Elizabeth? Melissa sized her brother up and said in an eccentric tone to emphasize her words, She's only 16. Hey, don't let your imagination run wild. Klein immediately explained, It's a very normal academic discussion. Elizabeth is very interested in history and ancient languages. Melissa took a deep look at her brother before saying, She's inside. I'll inform her. All right. Klein took a step back and moved away from the door. While watching his sister turn around, he heaved a sigh of relief. Although it wasn't the best of reactions, he was thankful that the person in danger wasn't Melissa. He only waited for about 10 seconds before a puzzled Elizabeth walked out. She asked curiously, Mr. Moretti, what's the matter? I never said I was interested in history and ancient languages. At that moment, her sentence was halted by Klein's stern and solemn expression. Her nerves tightened as she seemed to sense that something wasn't right. Klein took a few steps diagonally as a gesture for Elizabeth to hide partially behind the door. The girl with the chubby baby fat was influenced by the sudden serious atmosphere, so she unknowingly followed. As you know, I'm a mysticism enthusiast. Klein halted and turned around, speaking directly to the point. Elizabeth nodded and replied, Yes, I even believe that you're an expert at mysticism. No, I'm only an enthusiast, but this doesn't stop me from noticing that your magic mirror divination has turned into a problem. Klein said with a heavy tone. A problem? Elizabeth nearly raised her voice as she hurriedly raised her hands to cover her mouth. Klein thought for a moment before saying, I know words alone will make it difficult for you to believe me. Return to the room, and when Selena isn't paying attention, steal a glance at the front of the mirror, which Selena has hidden away from all of you. How do you know that she hid the front of the mirror from us? Elizabeth blurted out. According to the information from the Nighthawks, more than 90% of the time, magic mirror divination cases which involve evil share such similarities. Klein smiled and said, General knowledge. When the doubtful and frightened Elizabeth returned to the room, his composed smile vanished instantly. His face looked worried. Even though we're all in the North Borough, to go from Fania Street to Zotelen Street will take at least 15 minutes of travel by public carriage. By the time Captain arrives after making a round trip, the situation might have deteriorated to a hopeless state. If only Benson and Melissa weren't here. But I can't deal with those hidden and unknown existences. Do I have any means to contain it? Right. Selena is a mysticism enthusiast. Her room definitely has no lack of pure dew, essential oils, herbs, and other items. Just as Klein was racking his brains for a solution, Elizabeth sat next to Selena under the guise of discussing something with her. A girl opposite her sipped a mouthful of red wine, and under the teasing looks of everyone, despite her blushing, she mustered her courage to ask, "Can you help me divine when I'll meet a romantic and handsome gentleman?" Selena lightly coughed twice as she rubbed the mirror's back and said, "Mirror, mirror, tell me, when will the gentleman in Yonina's heart appear?" After repeating it 3 times, she picked up the mirror and raised it in front of her. Seizing this opportunity, Elizabeth suddenly turned her body and stretched out her head to take a glance. According to her expectations, she felt that she would see Selena's face and half her face. However, the only thing she saw was Selena. The tiny mirror only had Selena, and it was Selena's entire body. The mirror was completely pitch black, with Selena standing in the middle with a cold expression. Elizabeth trembled all over as she lunged backward and leaned against the sofa. She momentarily forgot to breathe. She involuntarily trembled and, without giving an excuse, got up immediately, stumbling to the door. She didn't even dare to turn back to look at the beaming Selena. Yonina's gentleman will appear on the Sunday of the second week, half a year later. Amidst giggles, Elizabeth opened the door and left the room to see Klein, who was standing in the shadows of the wall lamps in his tuxedo and half-top hat, definitely the look of someone who just stepped out of a 19th century drama. "Mr. Moretti?" "Aye," she stammered in a daze. Klein calmly smiled. "Don't disturb the girls and ladies inside." Infected by his smile, Elizabeth calmed down significantly. She extended her hand and closed the door as she quickly walked over to the wall lamp. "I saw it. I saw only Selena inside the mirror. A devil like Selena," she whispered hoarsely. Indeed, Klein's expression turned serious as he asked in a deep voice, "Do you know which is Selena's bedroom? Do you know where her mysticism items are?" "There, the mysticism items are in there as well." Elizabeth didn't hesitate to point at a room diagonally across. Klein held his cane and walked over, opening the unlocked wooden door. Under the streetlights and the crimson moon's illumination, he turned a valve and lit a gas lamp. A pale yellow light glowed as he swept the area and found bottles of pure dew, flower essence, boxes of herbal powder, candles, and amulets. These items were placed on tables or neatly arranged inside a rack, their names given on sticker labels. After confirming the items, Klein said to Elizabeth, who had followed behind him, "Do you want to save Selena?" "Yes." Elizabeth subconsciously nodded before asking in a daze, "Will it be dangerous?" "A certain amount. After all, I'm only a mysticism enthusiast," Klein replied frankly. "A certain amount of danger." Elizabeth pursed her lips tightly for a few seconds before saying, "Is there anything you need from me?" Klein smiled warmly as he comforted her. "Don't be nervous. Now, all you have to do is pretend to return as though nothing had happened. Return to Selena's side. 5 minutes later, remember, 5 minutes later, tell Selena that you have a pleasant surprise and bring her to me. Knock on the door softly, 1 long knock and 2 short ones. Following that, well, leave it to me." Elizabeth thought over it silently before nodding seriously. "All right." Seeing her return to the living room, Klein glanced at his pocket watch. He closed Selena's bedroom and quickly cleared the desk. Then he picked the items needed and placed them on a chair. Immediately following that, he picked up 2 faint candles with a light aroma. He placed them on the upper left and right corners of the desk. They were symbols representing the Lady of Crimson and the Empress of Disaster and Horror. Klein planned on holding a ritual here to borrow the Evernight goddess's powers to ward off the mysterious and unknown existence that was affecting Selena. As he was only a sequence 9, the ritualistic magic he knew wasn't strong enough. In order to succeed, he needed Elizabeth to lure Selena into a sealing circle, right in the vicinity of the altar. Therefore, he needed to consider situations in which Selena might notice and resist. Due to these reasons, Klein planned on using suspension-style ritualistic magic. Chapter 86, Prayer. Suspension-style ritualistic magic referred to the termination of a ritual according to the Beyonder's judgment. They could finish other matters first before returning to continue the ritual. You know, like when you're in the middle of a Netflix binge, and suddenly you realize you've run out of snacks, but you still gotta finish that episode. No turning back now. This technique was produced over 1,000 years of ritualistic magic development. After all, many high-level ritualistic magic required multiple steps. The duration ranged from an hour to half a day before finishing. Good luck trying to keep that a secret from your roommate who thinks you're just staring blankly at the wall. After gaining lessons from various predecessors through blood and tears, and probably some bad decisions that led to impromptu sacrifices, being able to suspend ritualistic magic became mainstream at the higher levels, and it also indirectly affected the lower level rituals. It's like how the big bosses in any company screw up and the interns have to pick up the slack. However, being able to suspend a ritual didn't mean that the ritual could be suspended at any time. One had to abide by mysticism theory and grasp the corresponding technique. Otherwise, it's like trying to hold in a sneeze while juggling fireballs. Good luck, buddy. Based on Klein's understanding, once one gained the attention of a particular divinity, and the divinity was waiting on the contents of the request, to suddenly say, "Wait, I need to use the bathroom," one could only be congratulated since they might never need to go to the bathroom ever again. "Sorry, Evernight Goddess, I just really can't hold it. I'll be right back." Or maybe not. Phew, Klein heaved a sigh of relief as he composed himself. It felt like he'd just dodged a spiritual bullet. Even though he had held many luck enhancement rituals and even designed a corresponding ritual that made an attempt at justice and the hanged man, this was his first actual ritualistic magic that abided by the rules. He was basically like a magician who finally read the instructions instead of winging it. After looking at the silver inlaid cane by the side of the bed, Klein picked up the third candle and placed it in the middle of the desk to represent himself. He figured it was either this or finding a voodoo doll to stick pins in, which might not go over well with the gods. He placed the silver bowl that Selena used for rituals in front of the third candle and replaced the axe with a sacred emblem. On the left were the pure dew and essential oils of the moonflower, slumber flower, and other plants. On the right, he placed a plate of salt, a small silver dagger, a piece of fake goatskin, and a quill that was dipped in ink. It was like preparing for a dinner party, but instead of appetizers, he had spiritual ingredients. Luckily, Selena had a complete inventory. Otherwise, he wouldn't have had any way to complete the preparations. As for the moderately fast rituals that Old Neil could perform, they were not something a seer could do, mostly because Old Neil was probably still figuring out how to light a match. From the looks of it, Selena was quite an experienced mysticism enthusiast. Yes, if she wasn't experienced, then she wouldn't have gotten into such trouble. She was only 16 and had been exposed to all of this for at least a year. Who had guided her? Ideas flashed through his mind as he picked up Selena's cup from the bed. He poured plain water into it and placed it beside the coarse salt. Water, the ultimate multitasker, refreshing, hydrating, and the perfect way to ruin your ritual when you accidentally spill it everywhere. He took out his pocket watch and popped it open. He didn't delay any further after taking a glance at it. He traced layers of the spherical light in his mind and quickly entered meditation. The room filled with floral fragrance suddenly succumbed to a formless whirlwind. Klein put away his pocket watch, and his eyes suddenly turned darker, from brown to black, as though he could see through one's soul. If only he could see into the fridge, too. Then he wouldn't have to guess what leftovers he could risk eating. He extended his palm and laid it against the candle in the top right corner. He chanted inwardly, "Evernight Goddess, you are the Lady of Crimson." He was feeling pretty dramatic now. He just needed a cape. As Klein chanted, he extended his spirituality and rubbed the candle wick. After a couple of moments, the candle suddenly lit up, revealing a tranquil blue inside the dim yellow light. It was like mood lighting for rituals. "Evernight Goddess, you are the Empress of Disaster and Horror." Just like before, Klein successfully lit up the second candle on the top left corner. "I am your loyal guard, the shield that fends against danger in the dark night, and the long spear that stabs at evil in the silence." Whoosh! The third candle that symbolized Klein began to burn, and he felt like the protagonist in a really edgy fantasy novel. The flame was still. He picked up the small silver knife and mimicked Old Neil's motions. He used incantations, coarse salt, and plain water to fulfill the purification. If only his love life could be purified that easily. Then he let his spirituality spew out from the tip of the silver dagger and merged them as one. With the silver knife in hand, Klein walked around the bedroom, kneeling when he came to the bed, and sealed the area with a formless barrier. The light from the street lamp outside the window suddenly disappeared, but the red light was still shining through quietly. Klein returned to the study desk and picked up the quill. With spirituality and ink, he drew incantations and symbols to ward off disaster. It was like creating an anti-disaster doodle while trying to focus on not freaking out. When all of that was finished, he put down the things he was holding. Then, he trickled a drop of pure dew, flower essence, and essential oils on each of the 3 candles. Sizzle! A faint fog filled the room, which suddenly possessed an additional hint of mystery. It was like a cheap horror movie. Mysterious fog, check. Creepy rituals, check. Next, he burned a few types of herbs before taking a step back from the mixture of fragrances and began reciting the corresponding incantation in the suspension ritualistic magic. Nobler than the stars and more eternal than eternity, the Evernight Goddess, I pray for your loving grace. I pray for you to show your loving grace to a devout believer of yours. I pray for the power of the crimson. I pray for the powers of disaster and horror. I pray that you will cleanse your devout believer, Selena Wood, from evil's corruption and be safe from danger. I pray that you would wait for a moment for that unfortunate girl. Moonflower, a herb that belongs to the red moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation. Slumberflower, a herb that belongs to the red moon, please bestow your powers to my incantation. After reciting the incantation, Klein closed his eyes and repeated it 7 times in his heart. He saw that there was nothing out of the ordinary at the altar. He then lifted the silver dagger again and took a few steps back to the door of Selena's bedroom. Elizabeth is acting so strange today. She started acting even stranger after she met Klein. She suddenly ran out earlier and said that she needed to use the bathroom. But why did she look so anxious? Selena's bedroom entrance. Elizabeth took a deep breath and said to the girl in front of her, "Let's go to your room." "Elizabeth, you seem very nervous and afraid. Why?" Selena looked puzzled at her good friend as she noticed her body trembling constantly. "Excitement! Yes, excitement!" Elizabeth shot a glance at the mirror in Selena's hand as she turned half her body around to knock on the door with a long knock, followed by 2 short successive ones. "Why are you knocking on the door?" Selena was baffled even more. Creak, her bedroom door opened. Dressed in his black tuxedo and half-top hat, Klein appeared in front of the 2 girls. Pleasant surprise? This is a pleasant surprise? Selena's mouth turned agape as she felt perplexed. At that moment, Klein suddenly reached out his hand and grabbed her by the wrist. He pulled her into the room as Elizabeth stood rooted to the ground. Simultaneously, Klein's silver dagger struck forward as it spewed out his spirituality, which quickly mended the door-shaped passage. The invisible spirituality wall sealed off the room, insulating Selena's screams within. Bang! Klein suddenly closed the door, and without even looking at Selena, he rushed to the desk. The wine, red-haired girl stopped screaming as she looked up and surveyed the room. Her gaze rapidly turned cold as her skin was mottled with paleness. Her fingers rapidly grew sharp fingernails. And at this moment, Klein had already returned to his cogitation state. He trickled a drop of moonflower and essential oil onto each candle as he chanted loudly, "Supreme Lady of Crimson, Great Empress of Disaster and Horror, I pray for you to bestow your loving grace. Show your loving grace to the lost lamb Selena Wood." While chanting, he picked up the fake goatskin and pushed it onto the candle representing the requester. Whoosh! He felt a cold wind blow behind him as an immense energy assaulted his body. The goatskin was ignited, and Klein threw it into a silver bowl. Then, he crouched downwards in accordance with his preparations to dodge the lethal strike. Whoosh! 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 The wind howled ferociously, and Klein felt the uncontrolled outpour of his spirituality surging like the currents. He saw the goatskin burning in the tiny silver bowl, burning in silent darkness, and he heard heavy items landing on the ground behind him. Bam! Bang! The 2 sounds followed one after another with almost no breaks in between. Wisps of dark green gases plunged into the silver bowl and vanished into the illusory darkness. Klein rolled to the side and got up. He drew his revolver from his armpit holster. However, he saw that the adorable red-haired girl Selena had fallen to the ground, and the silver-coated mirror had shattered into countless broken pieces on the carpet. Those shattered pieces didn't reflect Selena, but showed the ceiling and Klein's silhouette. Then, through the spirit vision he had left active, Klein saw the wicked dark green in Selena's aura had vanished completely. Everything returned to normal, but she seemed more frail. Phew! He had just relaxed when he felt a sharp, throbbing pain in his glabella and head. The sharp pain spread all over his body and made him want to roll around on the floor. Klein held his fists tight, and the veins on the back of his hands popped and became black. They looked like moving worms. Simultaneously, he heard silent screams and the whispers that ripped at his mind. It took him nearly 20 seconds to survive the ordeal. His forehead and vest were soaked in cold sweat. The ritualistic magic I used sucked up all my spirituality and almost made my Beyonder powers lose control. Klein made a rough guess of the situation. That also made him notice that he had digested quite a bit of the remaining energy in the potion. Based on his calculations, if he had the strength at the time he consumed the potion, he believed that there was no way he could have survived the ordeal. He could have become a monster straight away. Acting is quite effective after all. Klein tapped his glabella and wiped away his sweat. He turned towards the altar, tapped his chest 4 times, and said out loudly, "Praise the lady." Following that, he extinguished the candles and quickly tidied up the altar. Finally, he placed the items back into the desk and used his silver dagger to dispel the spirituality wall seal. Whoosh! The sound of the wind echoed before subsiding. Klein let out a long sigh of relief and felt a sense of lingering fear. If I hadn't walked through the process beforehand and successfully completed the ritual, then things would have become troublesome. Besides, I still don't know who my opponent or enemy is. Thankfully, the room was carpeted, so I didn't damage my clothes while rolling. He shook his head and reached out to open the wooden door to Selena's bedroom. How was it? Elizabeth took 2 steps back and asked nervously. Klein looked at her terrified expression and took off his half-top hat before saying with a warm smile, "I've already corrected the mistake of her magic mirror divination. It's been resolved now." Chapter 87, Exhortation. Has it really been resolved? Elizabeth asked, looking like someone just told her the world isn't actually ending. Klein flashed a chill smile and nodded casually. Yep, it wasn't too hard. Biggest lie of the year, he thought, shaking his head internally. If only she knew. Maybe it was Klein's calmness, or the fact that he was her only shot at survival, but Elizabeth didn't doubt him anymore. She patted her chest, clearly relieved. Thank you. You really are a gentleman. I was absolutely losing it just now. How's Selena? Is she still in one piece? She's knocked out for now, but she'll be okay. Expect a couple of days of weakness, though. Klein's face then turned serious, like a teacher about to drop the hammer. Who the hell taught her mysticism? Didn't they explain the basic "don't mess with this or you die" rules? Elizabeth straightened up like a student caught texting during class. She thought for a second before replying. Selena mentioned her teacher is Hanas Vincent. She met him about a year ago at the Divination Club on Howe Street. Hanas Vincent, teaching some messed up mirror magic on the down low. Klein groaned inwardly. If only I'd known earlier, I'd have had him locked up yesterday. Did he also teach her that mirror divination? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. The situation had nearly dragged in Klein's sister, Melissa. Oh, hell no. Elizabeth nodded cautiously, not wanting to push any more buttons. Yes, but Selena's attempts at magic mirror divination didn't really work. Today she told me she peeked at some hidden incantations from her teacher and thought it'd be fine. Of course she did. Klein massaged his temples like a guy listening to a kid explain why sticking a fork in a toaster seemed like a great idea. Do you remember any of the incantations? Elizabeth furrowed her brow, trying to recall. It was in Hermes. I only caught some of it. Words like revolve, spirit, creator, and grace. The true creator? Klein's mind raced. This was an ancient entity, revered by secret organizations, a figure from over 1,000 years ago. Damn. This isn't just a little game of magic mirror monopoly. Klein nodded, deep in thought. Once Selena wakes up, get her to tell you the whole incantation and then let me know, all right? Elizabeth didn't hesitate. Of course. But then she asked, a bit confused, why don't you ask her yourself? I don't want Melissa knowing I'm into all this mysticism stuff. Can you keep this between us? Klein shot back, a knowing smile on his face. Elizabeth's eyes twinkled mischievously. No problem. Melissa's more into machines than magic. She loves logic over all this mystery nonsense. Klein gave a mock bow. Thank you for your discretion. As for Selina, well, she's not exactly the best at keeping secrets herself. Elizabeth chuckled, agreeing. She's more of a let me tell you my darkest secret kind of person. Before leaving, Klein added, make sure you tell Selina that she fainted and broke her mirror during the divination. I doubt she'll remember much of what happened after that. Seeing Elizabeth nod, Klein put on his serious face again. Remember, never pray to anything but the 7 orthodox divinities, whether you're doing a divination or any other ritual. Burn any sketchy incantations, and if anyone hands you some weird mystical stuff, run the other way. Fast. If I hadn't stepped in when I did, Selina would have turned into a freaking monster or a ghost in 10 minutes, tops, and we'd all be toast. Elizabeth visibly shuddered, clearly believing every word. I get it. I'll remember, and I'll keep an eye on Selina. Good. Now, go take care of her. Klein raised his black cane and started toward the stairs, all dramatic-like. As he walked, his expression darkened. He pulled out a coin and flipped it into the air. Selina is fine now. Selina is fine now. He repeated the phrase, then caught the coin, seeing George III's face facing up. Great, all clear. Klein grinned and spun the coin between his fingers, like a guy who just hit the jackpot on a scratch ticket. That's something only a seer like Klein could pull off. Elizabeth watched as Klein disappeared down the stairs. She waited until he was out of sight before heading back into the room, where Selina was still passed out next to the shattered mirror. Elizabeth crept into the room, avoiding the broken glass like she was tiptoeing through a minefield. She checked to make sure the cold, eerie Selina wasn't staring back from the mirror shards. Nope, just the ceiling. Phoo! Elizabeth let out a long sigh, but despite her relief, she couldn't budge Selina. Finally, she resorted to waking her up. Elizabeth, what happened? Did I get wasted? Selina mumbled, her eyes glazed over and confused as hell. Elizabeth gave her a sober look. No, you didn't get drunk. You nearly called in a demon during that magic mirror divination. Seriously. Selina managed to get to her feet with Elizabeth's help. All I remember is starting the divination. Elizabeth gave a half-truth. During the ritual, you weren't yourself. You were, well, let's say, creepy as hell. I pretended I had a surprise for you and brought you here, where I smashed your mirror. Then you passed out. Praise the goddess, at least I'm still in one piece, Selina muttered, her face pale as paper. The more she tried to remember, the fuzzier everything became, and the more terrified she got. She glanced around the room, noticing how her desk had been rearranged, confirming something wasn't right. What the hell happened? Selina's brain was working overtime trying to figure it out, but the only thing she could remember was a man in a black suit and hat. Who was that? Selina, Elizabeth said, dead serious. I met a mysticism expert at the underground market when I bought your amulet. He said to never pray to anything but the 7 orthodox divinities. Please promise me no more of these mirror divinations. I had no idea if what I did even saved you. Selina, looking like she was one wrong memory away from a meltdown, nodded frantically. I swear no more. I'll never try that again. And, by the way, what exactly did your incantations mean? If I ever see that mysticism expert again, I'll ask him for you, Elizabeth asked, trying to sound casual. Selina rubbed her head, wincing. Something like spirit that revolves the world, the grace of the true creator, the eyes that look at fate. Tap, tap, tap. Klein brushed the dust off his clothes as he descended the stairs. Returning to the long dining table, Klein removed his hat and smiled at Selina's brother, Chris. Where'd you go? You've been gone for ages, Chris asked, his red hair glowing under the chandelier. He had the same short build as the rest of the family and was an exceptional lawyer with a sharp wit. Bathroom break, then a quick chat with the ladies, Klein replied, flashing an honest smile. Chris laughed. I appreciate the honesty. Oh, buddy, if only you knew what I really did up there. Klein thought, hiding his smirk. It was just a bit of academic discussion, he added. In the realm of mysticism. As the new round of cards started, Klein returned to his seat and flipped his hand. King of spades and ace of diamonds. Nice. Luck's on my side. Klein twirled a coin as he placed his bet. Since Hanas didn't intentionally give Selena the dangerous incantation, Klein decided not to report him to the captain just yet. I'll handle that problem another day. He played cautiously, only betting when he had a solid hand. No bluffs, no risks. When the game ended at 10:30, Klein had won 6 pence. I won 2 soli and 8 pence, Benson said, grinning as he counted his winnings. I didn't expect you to be such a poker pro, Klein chuckled. No, I don't play often, but it's just like negotiating. You've got to keep your cards hidden, read people, and either scare them or entice them. Benson trailed off as Melissa and her friends came down the stairs. It's time to head home, Klein said, glancing at his sister and rubbing his temples. The headache from earlier still hadn't gone away. After another trip to the bathroom, Klein discreetly passed Elizabeth, who gave him the complete incantation. Rejoining his siblings, he smiled. Rejoining his siblings, he smiled and said, "Oh, right, I suddenly remembered something. I need to head back to the company for a while. Shall we go to Zutaland Street first? It'll be quick." Elizabeth was staring at Klein's back and saw the flying coin before he caught it. Only when Klein vanished down the staircase did she turn to enter the bedroom. She saw Selena asleep on the floor with shattered pieces of the mirror beside her. She held her breath and tiptoed into the room as she looked at the fragments of the mirror. She made sure that the ice-cold Selena was no longer present. Instead, the fragments were reflecting the ceiling. Phew. Put completely at ease, Melissa heaved a long sigh of relief. But despite her efforts, she couldn't move Selena to the bed. Instead, she nudged her awake. "Elizabeth, what happened to me? Did I get drunk?" Selena asked weakly, the glow in her eyes having turned considerably dull while her eyes were filled with confusion. Elizabeth thought for a moment and replied in a serious tone, "No, Selena, something happened to you. Your magic mirror divination invited a malicious entity." "Is that so?" Selena weakly made her way to the bed with Elizabeth's help. She rubbed her temple as she said, "All I remember is when I started the magic mirror divination." Elizabeth told a half-truth. You were a completely different person during the ritual. The you in the mirror was completely different from the you in real life. I was very scared. Using the excuse of giving you a surprise, I brought you into the bedroom before I snatched your mirror and shattered it onto the carpet. After that, you fainted. Blessed be the goddess, you're okay now? I don't remember anything. Selena muttered, her face pale. The more Selena tried to remember, the emptier her mind became, and the more afraid she felt. Subconsciously, she glanced at her desk and noticed that the placement of items was clearly different. Just what happened exactly? Selena tried hard to remember, but she could only faintly remember a man in a black suit and hat. He was not strong or tall, but he had a straight back. "Selena," Elizabeth said seriously, "I met a mysticism expert when I went to the underground market to purchase the amulet. He said that we shouldn't pray to any entity other than the 7 orthodox divinities. Otherwise, we would be sure to invite disaster. Promise me, don't try this anymore. I didn't even know if what I did could save you just now." Selena was scared senseless. She nodded in a daze. "No more. I'll never try this again." "And just what did the incantations of your mysticism mean? If I have the chance to meet the mysticism expert again, I will ask him for you," Elizabeth asked, feigning nonchalance. Selena rubbed her temple and said, "Spirit that revolves this world, the grace of the true creator, the eyes that look at fate." Chapter 88, Report. "What's up?" Benson asked, casually tossing out the question like it was no big deal. Melissa gave him that big sister judging you look. She'd noticed Klein was acting weird tonight too, though. To be fair, he wasn't quite as bizarre as Elizabeth or Selena. Klein chuckled, already armed with a perfect excuse. "There was a mistake in one of the documents at work, so I told my colleagues I'd fix it first thing tomorrow. Now I've got 2 choices. Either fix it now since it's on the way, or wake up at the ungodly hour of 1/2 early. I think we both know which one I'm going with." Benson raised an eyebrow, suddenly understanding. "Ah, no wonder. I thought you were just zoning out, but it turns out you were thinking about work. Sorry, I should have known the card game was just helping you strategize." Melissa, looking away, just fixed her sleeves. All right, we'll wait for you. With public transport out of the question, the trio said goodbye to their hosts and hailed a carriage. 45 minutes, too solly. Benson grumbled. Every damn driver with his own carriage has crazy fees. Klein shrugged. Honestly, it's not that bad. It's almost 11. I know. I was just joking, Benson smirked. I was hoping we could share a ride with some other folks. 45 minutes can take you across town. Klein rubbed his silver inlaid cane, amused. Yeah, except no one wants to be caught dead sharing. These middle-class types care way too much about looking respectable. Benson nodded. Speaking of respectable, did you notice how fancy the Woods were? I thought Wood's weekly salary was £4. Guess looking respectable is the biggest difference between us and curly-haired baboons. Do you have a personal vendetta against curly-haired baboons or something? Klein stifled a laugh. Melissa, meanwhile, was giving Klein those silent side-eye glances that send chills down your spine. The carriage cut through the quiet streets, arriving at Zudaland Street in just 12 minutes. Wait here. 5 minutes tops, Klein said as he donned his top hat and stepped out with his cane. Since they were being charged by time, not distance, the driver didn't mind waiting. Upstairs, Klein knocked on the door of the Blackthorn Security Company. Leonard Mitchell, dressed in a vest and shirt, opened up. You're not on duty tonight, Leonard said, clearly surprised to see him. I've got something to report, Klein replied simply. Mission? Leonard asked, stepping aside. When Klein walked into the reception hall, Dunn appeared in his usual black windbreaker, his gray eyes carrying their typical stormy darkness. Captain, I came across a supernatural situation, Klein said, recounting the night's events and how he handled them. So, I think we should investigate Hanas Vincent. Nice work, Dunn replied, lifting his head. You acted before the evil spirit could fully materialize. We'll take care of the follow-up. Go home and get some rest. Klein laughed, relieved. I thought this was going to be some kind of initiation mission where I had to handle everything solo. Leonard chuckled. Not yet, but we've got something lined up for you. Klein's face fell. What? Dunn smirked. The police handed us a case earlier. It's not urgent, so you'll handle it solo tomorrow. Great, just what I needed, Klein muttered under his breath, knowing full well his tarot gathering was Monday afternoon. Guess I'll have to send Justice and the hanged man a rain check. Exiting the building, he glanced at the carriage. Melissa was watching him silently from the window, her expression unreadable. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away. Klein. What did you do? He thought, shaking his head before hopping back into the carriage. Under the crimson moon and starlit sky, they rode home. Once home, Klein let Benson take the bathroom first. Before Melissa could escape, he knocked on her bedroom door. She opened it, her expression full of suspicion. Melissa, you've got questions, don't you? Just ask, Klein said, not wanting to be silently judged anymore. Melissa's lips twitched as she frowned. Klein, what did you do to Elizabeth? She was acting weird. And then Selena, same thing. Klein was ready. Did you know that Elizabeth and Selena are super into mysticism? Yeah, but I hate it, Melissa admitted. There's nothing that can't be explained by science. Anything mysterious just means we don't know enough yet. Klein nodded, echoing her sentiments guiltily. Yeah, exactly. But Elizabeth knows I'm a history buff, and since Hermes is part of ancient rituals, she asked me about the pronunciation of some words. Melissa's frown eased. Makes sense. As for why they started acting weird, I have no idea, Klein continued smoothly. But I can guess. Melissa looked shocked. You figured it out? Klein covered his mouth dramatically. From the Hermes words they asked about, they were linked to divination and some dark stuff. Did Selena say any weird stuff during the magic mirror thing? Yes, Melissa replied, still processing. I think I get it now. Klein nodded, continuing the ruse. Elizabeth probably tried to correct Selena's mistake after asking me about those words. That's why things got awkward. Yeah, I think so, Melissa said, fully convinced now. Relieved, Klein sighed. Next time, tell Selena to stick to something less evil. He tapped his chest like a priest, and Melissa nodded resolutely. Yes, I will, Melissa replied, sounding determined. And don't tell Elizabeth and Selena about our deduction or about the things that I've said. I actually promised Elizabeth not to tell you, Klein emphasized. Okay. Melissa nodded lightly. On Monday morning at 8, in the Blackthorn Security Company. Klein took off his hat and greeted Rosanne and Brett. After exchanging a few words, he entered Captain Dunsmith's office. He pushed the door open and looked around. He suddenly had a shock because Dunn's face was pretty pale and his gray eyes looked clouded without their usual darkness. What happened? Hanas Vincent? Klein asked in concern and shock. Dunn rubbed his forehead, took a sip of coffee, and replied with a bitter smile. Hanas Vincent is dead. Who killed him ahead of time? Klein sat before Dunn with his cane in hand. Dunn didn't answer immediately, but sighed and said, Leonard and I went to look for Hanas Vincent last night. As his usual behavior didn't show any unusual signs, and there was nothing odd about his house, I decided to enter his dreams to look for clues. In his dream, Dunn's eyes showed fear as he repeated himself twice, before he continued. In his dream, I saw a cross, a huge cross, one that blotted out the sky. On the huge cross, there was a naked man nailed to it with black nails. His arms and legs were pinned with his arms extended outwards. He was hung upside down, his head hung low like a chandelier. There were strips of blood stains on his body. Upon seeing such a scene, I lost consciousness. I left Hanas Vincent's dream, and when I woke up, Leonard told me that Hanas had died in his sleep. Huge cross, hung upside down, the man covered in blood stains. It's similar to some of the stories of the true creator that some of the hidden organizations believe in, but there are considerable differences too. Klein made a deduction in suspicion. The few hidden organizations that believed in the true creator had only appeared in the last 2 or 3 centuries, such as the Aurora Order and the Iron and Blood Cross Order. However, similar such depictions had never disappeared over the past 1,000+ years. Dunn rubbed his forehead again. We'll follow up on this. As for you, go ahead and complete your initiation mission first. Chapter 89, A Simple Mission, or So They Said. Klein nodded and said, All right, but I still don't know what my mission is. Great. Another day, another confusing gig that nobody bothers to explain. Guess that's what I signed up for. Forever winging it. Nothing dangerous. I haven't seen any signs of danger at the very least, Dunn emphasized, clearly trying to downplay the madness that probably awaited. This is a case referred to us by Golden Indus's police department. Sir Deweyville, a famous philanthropist, has been experiencing unusual harassment over the past month. Neither his bodyguards, security team, nor the police have managed to find the culprit. Inspector Tolle, who's in charge of the case, suspects it might involve some beyonder powers. So, it's our problem now. Philanthropist, huh? Must be tough, rolling in cash while being harassed by what? Ghosts? Annoying exes? Either way, it's ruining his beauty sleep. I saw Sir Deweyville at the library the other day and noticed he looked, well, like a man on his 5th energy drink, Klein said, knitting his brows. What kind of harassment are we talking about here? Sir Deweyville hears moans and cries every night, Dunn explained. And no, not the kind you're thinking. Get your mind out of the gutter. Wherever he is, Tinjin or not, he's constantly tormented by these sounds. It's affecting his sleep, and he's gone through all the logical options. He's seen psychiatrists, and his staff confirmed it's not just in his head. Moans and cries, huh? Someone's into some real kinky haunting, Klein thought. But he kept his face professional, nodding instead. So, I just put on a uniform and meet this Inspector Tolle, and he'll tell me more? Dunn rubbed his forehead and gave a tired smile. Yes, you're practically in the police now. Welcome to the club of half-baked inspectors. Perks, as Emperor Roselle would say. Uniform, huh? Too bad I can't just keep it and wear it on laundry day. Klein nodded, picked up his cane, and left Dunn's office. In the break room, a crisp black and white uniform awaited him. The cap sported the police department's logo, 2 crossed swords and a crown, because what screams law enforcement more than that? The shoulder epaulets gleamed with a silver star, and beneath it was the badge number, 06254. I better not screw this up, or I'm going to be 06254. Oh no, he didn't. He changed, admiring himself in the mirror for a second. Not bad. Look at me, the dashing detective. Maybe I can even scare the ghosts away with this outfit. With a confident swagger, Klein left the room and met with Inspector Tolle at the shooting club. Tolle was an older man whose uniform struggled to contain his gut, probably from a few too many beers. His thick blonde mustache twitched as he smiled. Moretti? Klein Moretti? Tola greeted. Glad to see you. Shall we head to Sir Deweyville's place? Sure, let's go solve the mystery of who's too loud in bed. No problem, Klein said with a straight face. You can fill me in on the details during the carriage ride. As they rode, Toll briefed him on Sir Deweyville, the philanthropist turned sleepless zombie. His moans and cries started about a month ago, and nothing could make it stop. Not even a hefty donation to the goddess herself. His wealth and reputation didn't spare him from this bizarre curse. From his lead factory days to his steel and shipping empire, Deweyville had done it all. But apparently, nobody's too rich for some good old supernatural torment. Even ghosts know where the money's at. The carriage finally pulled up in front of Sir Deweyville's grand estate. The place was practically a castle, a two-story mansion with statues, fountains, and enough space to host a small army. But nope, 2 stories is as tall as they get around here because apparently they're afraid of heights or something. Sergeant Gate, a no-nonsense officer, greeted them and led them inside. Klein, doing his best impression of someone who actually knew what he was doing, followed. As they entered, he activated his spirit vision, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever was haunting Deweyville. And there he was, the man of the hour, Sir Deweyville, looking like he'd aged 5 years in the last month. Guess ghosts don't care if you're a knight or a billionaire. Good morning, Sir Deweyville, Klein and the others greeted in unison. Sir Deweyville forced a smile, like someone who'd been on hold with customer service for way too long. I hope you can resolve what's been causing me distress. Well, sir, we'll give it a shot, or at least I'll throw a punch if it comes to it. Klein squinted, studying Deweyville closely, but nothing jumped out at him. No glowing aura, no otherworldly presence, just a rich dude having a bad time. That's odd, Klein muttered under his breath. He turned to Deweyville. Where did you first hear the moans? In my bedroom, Deweyville replied warily. Great, let's start there, Klein said, more out of habit than excitement. The butler, Cullen, clearly didn't think this was going to go anywhere but obliged anyway, leading the way. Klein followed closely, mentally preparing for the worst. Or maybe just some weird ghostly ASMR. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. They arrived at the 2nd story and entered the master bedroom. Klein didn't have the time to survey the surroundings when the hair on his body stood on end. This was feedback from his spiritual perception. Chapter 90, Finding by Sight. Sir Deweyville's bedroom was larger than Klein's living room and dining room combined. Dude must have been living in luxury. This room was tricked out. A place for a bed, a living area, a changing room, bathroom, and a study. Everything screamed, I'm rich, deal with it. But for Klein, something felt off. The room was dim, colder than it should have been, and there was this weird vibe, like someone was crying and moaning. Bro, it was like walking into a haunted house minus the cheesy jump scares. Suddenly, everything snapped back to normal. The sunlight came beaming through the window, the temperature was just right, and the people around, police, bodyguards, the butler, they were all chilling in silence. Weird, right? He glanced at the fancy bed and could almost swear he saw eyes peeking from the shadows. Not the normal kind, more like the creepy, watching you while you sleep kind of eyes. Gross. Taking a few more steps, Klein's spirit vision showed him nothing. No ghosts or wraiths here, just your run-of-the-mill paranormal activity. What was this crap anyway? He frowned, diving into his mental library of mysticism knowledge. If it were up to a corpse collector, gravedigger, or spirit medium, this would be a piece of cake. But nope, it landed in his lap. Great. Resisting the urge to bust out a quick divination. Because let's face it, this was weird. Klein casually scanned the room, piecing together his suspicions. Inspector, Sir Deweyville finally piped up. Did you find anything? Klein gave him a look that screamed. Really? If it were that simple, you think we'd still be standing here, buddy? He shot back. If it were that easy, my colleagues would have solved this ages ago. He was just about to turn his gaze away when he caught sight of something in the mirror behind Deweyville, a faint white human figure. Nope. Scratch that. Figures. Plural. Stacked like some kind of freaky spirit sandwich. The sobbing hit him again. Klein barely kept from whipping out his gun. Yeah, nothing like seeing some ghostly stuff to make you almost lose it. Man, this spirit vision's gonna give me a heart attack one day, he thought, trying to chill out before turning back to Deweyville. That's when he saw it, this faint, twisted figure shimmering around Deweyville. The dude was practically wearing an "I'm haunted" badge. The lighting around him dimmed with every flicker of that figure. And of course, there were those creepy cries and moans, barely audible. "What's your deal, man?" Klein thought, mentally ticking off a list. Yep, this case was starting to make sense. Deweyville wasn't just haunted. He was cursed with some leftover anger from the dead. Resentment, to be exact. This kind of resentment could snowball into something way worse, like a wrathful spirit. Now, here's the kicker. Sir Deweyville was famous for being a philanthropist. Even Klein's bro, Benson, respected him. So what was up with this dude? Was he a secret jerk, or was someone else pulling some Beyonder-level strings? Klein narrowed his eyes and shot a question. "Honorable sir, may I ask you a few things?" Deweyville, looking like he hadn't slept in a decade, nodded. "Please, go ahead." Klein cut straight to the point. "When you leave this place, say to Backland or a village, do you get a few hours of peace before the creepy stuff kicks in again? Do you still hear the moaning even during the day?" Deweyville's tired eyes widened like he'd just found the last slice of pizza at a party. "Yes. Yes, that's exactly what happens. Did you find the root of this problem?" Bingo, Klein thought. The guy had been so messed up from insomnia that he forgot to mention this crucial detail to the police. No wonder his case was dragging out. Even Inspector Toll, who had been watching all this go down, seemed to relax a bit. "It's all coming together now," Klein mused. This haunting wasn't just some run-of-the-mill ghost problem. It was deep resentment, left over from the dead. His options? Perform a ritualistic exorcism or dig deeper to find out the cause. Klein opted for the second one first. No need to freak out Deweyville with some ritual mumbo-jumbo yet. "Sir, I have some news for you," Klein started, putting on his best poker face. "This is a psychological issue, a mental problem, if you will." Deweyville raised a brow, looking like Klein just told him he was a couple screws loose. "Are you saying I belong in an asylum?" "No, nothing that extreme. Everyone's got some psychological stuff going on, to be honest. It's perfectly normal," Klein reassured, casually throwing out nonsense with a straight face. "In fact, I'm a psychological expert from the police." That got Deweyville's attention. He glanced at Inspector Tolley, who gave him a nod like, "Yep, that's legit." "What's next? How are you going to treat this?" Deweyville leaned forward, confused. "And why do others hear the moaning too?" Klein smirked and replied, "I'll explain after we fix it. For now, ask your butler, bodyguards, and everyone else to leave the room. I need peace and quiet." With everyone gone, Deweyville laid down as instructed, and Klein got to work. He drew the curtains and whipped out his trusty pendulum, checking for danger. Once the coast was clear, he sat in a chair and entered cogitation mode. Time to dive into the spiritual world and talk to some angry spirits. As he drifted off into a deep sleep, the sobbing returned, and translucent figures started floating around him. Time for some dream communication. Klein reached out, and before he knew it, the spirits came rushing at him like it was Black Friday at the mall. What Klein saw next was a series of tragic lives. One girl after another, all suffering from lead poisoning in the factories Deweyville owned. These girls weren't just dead, they were furious. Their lives had been cut short by the dangerous conditions they worked in, and Deweyville's wealth came from their suffering. Klein now understood why these spirits were haunting him. It wasn't just random, it was a union of their collective resentment. Deweyville's kindness didn't erase their pain. It only masked the dark reality behind his factories. The most powerful spirit, a girl named Haley, was the final piece of the puzzle. She had suffered in silence, watching her family struggle while her own health deteriorated. When she finally succumbed to lead poisoning, her death became the anchor for all the other spirits. That only by addressing this hidden injustice could he truly end the haunting. Suddenly, Klein's surroundings transformed, shifting from the factory to a quiet alley. It was twilight, and a teenage girl stood near the entrance, staring at a building in the distance. Her frail form and the vacant look in her eyes told Klein everything he needed to know. This was Haley. Without saying a word, Klein found himself following her, retracing her final moments. The haunting vision brought him through her last days of work at the factory, her body slowly weakening from the lead poisoning and the despair that filled her mind. The pain, the exhaustion, and the hopelessness were almost unbearable to witness. Haley's movements were mechanical, as though she was nothing more than a shell. She didn't seem to notice Klein or her surroundings. Her focus was solely on the factory. The vision began to shift again, revealing a rundown room where Haley sat on a thin, threadbare mattress. She was trying to write a letter, her hands trembling with effort, her face pale and drawn. She scribbled down her thoughts, but the words were barely legible. Still, she forced herself to keep writing, as if it was the only thing tethering her to this world. Klein could feel her sadness, her regret. She knew she was dying, but she couldn't stop working. Her family needed the money, and there was no one else to support them. Every day was a struggle to survive, and yet, despite the pain, she pressed on. She hoped her sacrifice would help her family in the long run, even if it meant her own life was cut short. The vision blurred, jumping forward to Haley's final moments. She was lying on her bed, too weak to even sit up, her breathing labored and shallow. Her mother sat beside her, holding her hand and crying softly. Haley's face was blank, devoid of any expression. Her body had given up, and her spirit was close behind. She could hear her mother's voice, but it was distant, as though it were coming from another world. The last thing Haley saw before the darkness consumed her was the face of her younger brother, staring at her with wide, fearful eyes. She had done everything she could for him, for her family. But the difference this time was that she was dead.